if I transform myself, that's the most powerful thing I can do in order to change the world, right? All of these systems are comprised of individual people. They're not, so you can't really change a whole system without the individuals that make it up.
From Anarchapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. And I usually talk quite non-violently, and I've heard tons of stuff about non-violent communication. I even have the book on my Kindle. I haven't read it yet, but everything I've heard about it seems to be a lot of how I've kind of communicated most of my life, and it's worked quite well. And a lot of people kind of don't communicate that way, and they don't have much good results in real life when they're communicating in certain ways, and they're trying to get across certain ideas, and they're not doing it in a certain way that's quite receptive to most people. So I actually don't know a ton about it, but I know a lot of people are really into it. So I'm really excited that we have on Katie Testa coming in from Motown, Detroit, and she actually is a certified nonviolent communication trainer. She's a coach as well. She's also a doula. I don't know if we'll even get into that, but that's very interesting to me as well. And she's actually going to be speaking at Anarchapulco 2020 on this, and she actually had a lot of people who really recommended her, and that's how we ended up having her speak. And so I actually met her like years ago, but very briefly at, I think, Anarchy in New York City around 2013 or something like that. But this is the first time I'm talking to her about nonviolent communication, and I think a lot of people really should learn about this sort of thing, because I've seen a lot of, especially anarchists out there, trying to talk to statists, and it's not working. With you're an idiot, shut up, all this kind of stuff, and if they just learn, and this is something that I think Larkin Rose talks quite a bit about in his own fashion, about with Candles in the Dark, which he'll be doing in Anarchapulco. So if you want to learn about a lot of this stuff, definitely come to Anarchapulco. But we're going to get into some of it right here. So Katie, it's great to see you again. It's been a long time, and the first question though I have to ask you though is, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, thanks, Jeff, for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you and share a bit more about nonviolent communication. It's something I'm really passionate about, and I think strikes the roots just in language and how we communicate, and how subtle ways language plays a role in power over thinking and stuff that contributes to things like the government, and the education system and all of that. So to answer your question, how did I become an anarchist? It's kind of hard to answer directly, because it seems like almost I always was one and didn't have a coherent philosophy to articulate, to kind of explain it, and I think a lot of anarchists kind of resonate with that. But in elementary school, I was kind of your typical good girl, getting good grades, following all the rules, conforming to what my parents expected of me, what society expected of me. And as a teenager, my parents got divorced. I experienced some trauma, and I really rebelled so hard. I ended up getting tangled up in the state. I was incarcerated from 14 to 17, not the entire duration of that time, but a maximum security juvenile prison.
Whoa.
And so a lot of people are surprised to hear that, like, no way, you
maximum security prison when you were a teenager?
the jumpsuit, the whole thing. So
holy cow.
So while I was in the system, the prison system, I saw firsthand what the state does with children. There were children who were wards of the state. They essentially didn't have a parent or a guardian or family to care for them, and it was just so tragic and painful and traumatic to see that. So that really gave me a bad taste in my mouth in relationship to police and to judges and puppies but I was still kind of in this rebellious, screw the man kind of perspective. And when I was 19, I got pregnant with my first child, and that was unexpected. I didn't plan that, but I went with it. And so it was really when I had my first baby where I started to become curious about kind of like how this whole human thing works, like parenting and all of that. Nobody kind of explains it to you. So
yeah, I've noticed that too. It's like no one tells you any of this stuff. Like you go to this 12 years of government indoctrination camps. Like, how do you be a parent, or how do you learn, or how do you think? And those things are never taught to you.
Exactly. And I knew I didn't want to do kind of what my parents did in a lot of ways, because obviously, I had all kinds of issues fitting in and whatever. I had ended up, also I didn't mention, I dropped out of high school at 10th grade. I got kicked out of class left and right for asking questions mostly. I think that my biggest problem was that I was curious, and I really wanted to understand why people do things and what is this all about. And that's really problematic for some people in positions of authority, because it's kind of threatening their sense of security and stability in what they're doing in their life. And so that really led to a lot of problems for me. But everybody was super scared. Oh, Katie, you're going to be homeless, and you're never going to make it, And here I am getting in trouble, getting locked up. So anyway, fast forward, I have my first child, and I'm in the hospital, and the doctors kind of want to wrap him up and put him in this clear box beside me. And my instinct is like, no, I want to hold him, skin to skin. And nobody told me that. I just really felt it in my heart, like this is the natural way to be with this child. And it started out kind of just following my intuition as a mother and breastfeeding on demand and not kind of making my child conform to a clock and all of this. And I got a lot of kickback from parents and family and judgments about how you should raise a child. We're going to never be independent and all of that. And so I really kind of questioned that, and that led me to becoming a doula. I don't have to go into all of that, but I saw kind of also how the healthcare system kind of systematically disconnected us from our bodies, from our health, from what really kind of made intuitive sense to me. And so it wasn't until probably 2007, at this time I had kind of questioned our whole food system. I was looking at corn is in everything, and that happens to be subsidized by the government. Later I found that out and kind of really brought some clarity to that issue. But my husband at the time was taking a class called The Global Problems of Capitalism. And I think Barack Obama was running for office at the time. And I was at home with our two babies, and I really have a strong need for intellectual stimulation. So he would bring these textbooks home, and I would read them, because I was with little kids all day. And I started to read this book, and it explained how at some point we left the gold standard. And I was like, this seems kind of weird. They're not really talking about what seems to me would be the consequences of that. And so I started to Google gold standard, central banking. I learned about fiat currency. I learned about currency, and then I was like, that was the one thing that had unified all of these different perspectives, including at that point I had people had been asking me, when is your son, he was now maybe 3, when are you going to put him in preschool? And that to me also was like, I don't like that idea. I didn't really know why, but it just didn't seem to make sense. Why would I give my child over to someone else, kind of outsource my parenting relationship to some sort of system when I had such a painful experience in school? I saw that it wasn't really about learning. It was more about conformity and jumping through the hoops and kind of doing what you should do. And so during that time I had read Maria Montessori, and she was all about, honoring a child's autonomy. And then I came across John Taylor Gatto. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he wrote a book called The Underground History of American Education. I learned about the Prussian, school system. And then I read John Holt, and he's kind of the grandfather of unschooling, and that really resonated with me. So from there on out, I was all about unschooling. And so all of those different pieces kind of came together. But it really took that, getting clarity about economics, before I could really articulate my perspective about anarchism. But I was kind of on that path for a long time. So.
Well, I can definitely understand why you were kicked out of school. You actually have an interest in actually finding out the truth and learning about things, and that's not allowed in the government schools. You're supposed to write down what the government did and how good they are and how it all works and why you should support it and all that kind of stuff. So, wow, that was quite one of the better sort of responses to how you became an anarchist, with so many different sort of things in your life that affected it and made you wake up to what's actually going on, and actually question it and look into it, and then realize, okay, this whole system is basically horrible. Interesting that you pointed out Montessori. I actually have 2 kids, and I'm somewhat embarrassed to say they're both in school. They're both in Montessori school, though, and in Mexico, it's so amazing here. Like everything you hear about it on the news is so wrong, up in the U.S., if you go to Montessori school, it could be like thousands of dollars a month. I've seen even like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month, for some of the better ones in New York and stuff like that. Here in Mexico, I've never paid more than $300 a month. I think it's about $200 a month right now for Montessori school. And both my kids wanted to check it out, and they just loved it. And especially here in Mexico, it's got this sort of culture, a very loving sort of family sort of culture. It's just like they consider it's their other family, it's their other friends that they get to go see in the day and have a lot of fun, which is not how I used to think about a school, and you either, I'm sure.
No,
for me, it was in Canada. It's like, okay, walk a mile in minus 40 weather through snow, almost die on the way because it's so cold. Get there, get beat up all day, get a bunch of teachers telling you to write down stuff that you don't care about, then walk home, make yourself some macaroni and cheese because mom's not there, she's at work. I was a latchkey sort of a kid. So anyway, very, very interesting all of your story. But the main thing I want to focus on, even though we could get into stuff like dualism or unschooling, and a lot of that stuff we will have people talking about at Anarchapulco anyway, but the thing that I want to focus on is the nonviolent communication, because from my understanding of it, it sounds like a lot more people really need to understand this stuff if they want to have a better life experience and better sort of relationships and better conversations and better things like that, even business sort of related stuff. And I'm quite curious because I've just kind of glimpsed at what it's about, and I'm like, I've been basically doing that most of my life from what I've heard, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it. So I want to hear from you, basically, what is nonviolent communication?
Yeah, so thanks for that. Yeah, there's so many things we could talk about, really. But nonviolent communications, like I said, is one thing I'm really passionate about. And essentially what it is it's a practical skill set, right, to deal with conflict, one. And second, I see it as a map to an entirely different consciousness. So the consciousness that we're raised in our culture is judgment-based. So it's what is the right thing to do? What is the wrong thing to do? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? And the people that do the wrong things, they're evil and bad, and they deserve to be punished. And the good people, those good people, they deserve to be rewarded. And it's all coming from judgment. And we also, another flavor of judgment is like a label, such as a statist or a misogynist or a feminist or an idiot. There's lots of different things we can call each other. And they typically don't serve connection, which nonviolent communication is really just a tool for building connection. And first of all, that connection is within ourselves. So instead of looking through the lens of judgment at the world, we can start to look through this other lens of nonviolent communication, which is based in our feelings, which everybody has feelings, whether you like it or not. We feel, most of us before NVC kind of see things like happy, mad, good, bad, fine. There's not really a lot of nuance there in our vocabulary and our emotional experience. And MVC can provide a lot more options for us to describe our internal experience. So, instead of just mad, we have frustrated, irritated, annoyed, etc., or happy, joyful, excited, enthusiastic, inspired. There's a lot of different words to describe our feelings. And those feelings arise in us for a reason. It's not just like, I'm just going to go by how I feel, which is one of the criticisms you hear of NVC is like, well, that's kind of irrational. Well, nonviolent communication provides kind of a reason for our feelings, and that's that they're directly connected to our needs. And those needs are universal. That means that I have the same needs as Jeff has, as anybody who's watching or listening to this has. Across cultures, across ages, it doesn't matter. We all have these needs. And, of course, you can start with the basic things like air and, air, nutrition. But we're psychological beings, so our needs are quite complex. We have needs for meaning, needs for purpose, needs for connection, community, support, trust, fun, play, sexual expression. There's a lot of different needs, and I have a list of those on my website, which I'll mention later. But once you understand that these needs are really at the heart of anything any human being does, it provides a path to connect with anybody. It doesn't matter where they are on the political spectrum, what philosophy, what life philosophy, what language they speak. It's just really helpful as a pathway, like I said, to connect. And another important distinction in nonviolent communication is between those needs, the things that we value. You can also use the word values, it's interchangeable. Aside from those, there are the strategies or the things we do to meet those needs, which are different than the needs themselves. So, for example, I might have a need for security, like financial security. One way of doing that would be to have a 9-to-5 office job, right? Another way to do that could be starting my own business. So there's different strategies that we can utilize in order to meet our needs. And when we make this separation between the things we do to meet our needs and the needs themselves, we can start to have a deeper conversation about what's really going on and find more creative ways to meet those needs that's no longer kind of binary. Very often we're like, in order to meet this need, and we're not even aware of what the need is. It's like, I either do this or I don't do this, and when we become aware of the need, we can see like, oh, there's a myriad of strategies or different ways that I can fulfill this need. And with that awareness of our feelings and needs really increases our sense of choice. And for me, choice is very connected to the need for freedom, which we all share. Freedom, liberty, independence, those are essential human needs that we don't want to sacrifice. I know I just said a lot. There's more to say, but I want to pause here and just check in with you and see how that lands.
Yeah, very interesting. It's actually a little, sounds deeper than what I thought it was. I actually have a therapist, kind of like a life coach, actually. He used to be more my therapist. Now he's more of a life coach, now that we've worked out a lot of my issues. And it's Johnny Dupre, and he was on my show before, and he spoke at Anarchapulco last year. And he's sort of like a hypnotherapist, but he's also kind of like a life coach. And a lot of the stuff that I've kind of learned from him over the last year or two is when I say, oh, I'm having a problem with my wife, for example, and he'll be like, well, what happened? And I'll be like, well, she got really mad about this. And some of the stuff that I kind of learned from him is like, no matter what she's saying, there's something behind it. Like there's a deeper meaning to it, right? Mm-hmm. So she could be like, oh, you went out drinking with your friends and I'm angry. And he was like, well, what you need to do, or what you should do is first of all, tell her you hear her, right? So this is, I don't know if this is part of NPC or not, but this is stuff that I've learned about communicating with people, is make sure that they know that they've been heard. And then secondly, then go, well, what's the reason behind this? Like, why do you feel that way? And ask these sort of questions. And then it gets down to a deeper sort of problem or issue that they feel is unresolved that you can then try to resolve. Is that something to do with NPC, or is that a little bit different?
Totally, yeah. So a lot of times we start in a conflict and someone's saying like, oh, you made me feel this way by what you did, right? And so in nonviolent communication, there's this whole idea of taking 100% responsibility for our emotional experience. That means that nobody else can make us feel a certain way. It's actually our needs either being met or not met that those feelings arise from. So perhaps in this example, this conflict with your wife, if she's feeling angry when she saw that you were drinking with your friends, there's a need there. It's not you that's making her angry. It's her values or her needs or what's important to her. So maybe it's a need for trust. Maybe it's a need for shared reality. Maybe it's a need for connection. Or maybe she needs fun and play, And so it's kind of like, hey, you're getting that. Why am I not getting that? It could be a multitude of different things. But when we look at those needs as opposed to what Jeff should or shouldn't be doing, it's an entirely different conversation, because we could talk all day about who's right and who's wrong, and we've all kind of experienced what that leads to, especially from the anarchist perspective. If you're trying to talk to people about freedom, a lot of times we try to talk about it in a way of making other people wrong, like you guys are seeing the world in the wrong way and we have the right way of seeing it. Well, I know, especially from my rebellious past, that nobody can make me do anything. Like, if someone is pushing on me, telling me that I'm wrong and I should be different, I'm going to resist that. And I think that is also a universal human experience. We all have this need for autonomy. It's very important. And so one thing you mentioned, Jeff, is making sure that this other person feels heard. So in nonviolent communication, instead of reflecting back at the judgments that we're receiving, like, Jeff, you shouldn't be drinking, what a bad husband you are, it's more like, and I don't know your wife's name, but saying something like, are you feeling angry because you'd really like to have more trust in our relationship? So you kind of translate that judgment into a feelings and needs statement, and then you might follow it up with, is that right? And give her a chance to reflect back or refine what it was that she said. Now, this can be really difficult to do, to reflect back what someone said and guess what their feelings and needs are if we're also, like, stimulated, if we're angry, if we're disconnected from our feelings and needs. So there's kind of this principle of, like, if I'm needing empathy or connection to my feelings and needs, it's going to be really hard to facilitate that for another person. So that's where nonviolent communication, I feel, is really about a self-practice first, as opposed to, going out there and trying to get other people connected to their feelings and their needs. It's really coming back here, and I think that's something maybe you and I share in our history as anarchists. Like, when I was initially becoming an anarchist, I was kind of like this activist, I started this coalition, I had events, and we were protesting and going and convincing other people. I just saw that wasn't effective, really. And eventually you come back around to realize, if I transform myself, that's the most powerful thing I can do in order to change the world, right? All of these systems are comprised of individual people. They're not, so you can't really change a whole system without the individuals that make it up changing themselves. And you also can't make another person change, but you can change yourself, and changing yourself is super inspiring for other people to see. I know watching you, Jeff, transform over the years has been inspiring to a lot of people, and that can motivate them to become more introspective and self-connected. So essentially what I'm saying is nonviolent communication starts kind of with our self-connection before connecting to others. However, that's not where a lot of us start, so it is this helpful practical tool for a conflict like this example we were starting out with. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Yeah, so, that's one thing I've kind of learned over the last few years is almost everything you're trying to do really starts with yourself. And that's what I think you're saying is, and that's something that, probably a few years ago, and I thought I was pretty good at this sort of communication sort of stuff. But if she would have went, oh, you went out with your friends, you came home at 4 in the morning, I'm angry, I probably would have said something like, oh, shut up, you always tell me what to do, you're always nagging me, and then there's a fight, right? I'm not always like that, but, sometimes people kind of trigger you, right? They kind of make you angry. It's like, well, leave me alone, let me, I've been working hard all week, I want to go out, that kind of stuff. But I would have posed it that way. And then over years, I kind of started to work on myself a lot more. And then that sort of anger sort of thing doesn't come back at them as much. I'm a lot more able to listen. And then once I'm able to listen, then I'm able to even ask them questions, because one thing I kind of realized as I've been going through this coaching and therapy and all this kind of stuff over the years is you don't actually really know what you're really feeling a lot of the time. You're kind of confused in your own head. So if my wife would say something like that, she might not even know what the real root of her anger is. And so if you can work on yourself enough, and then you're able to help them to get to the bottom of that sort of stuff, then you can have a real amazing sort of connection.
Exactly, yeah. Most people don't really know. They don't have, like I said, this nuanced vocabulary to describe their emotions. They also aren't really aware of their needs most of the time. What we are aware of is our thoughts and our judgments and kind of what we think about it, and the shouldn'ts and the right wrongs and the good bads, right? That's kind of the world that we live in almost all the time. And so when we are aware that, there's this other lens we can look through of feelings and needs, we can relate to the people we're close to that are kind of still looking through this other lens of judgment, and facilitate that awareness by giving them a guess. So is it that you're feeling angry because you really value trust or health or intimacy, whatever the need might be? And remember that those needs are different than strategies. It's not, are you feeling angry because I shouldn't drink, right? That's two different things. So with that guess, even if people don't know NVC, it helps them kind of land a little bit deeper, get out of their thoughts, get out of their narrative about what's happening, and return inward. And that's really what we're talking about, right? It's coming back to us, coming back to ourselves. So we can facilitate that inward turn by offering a feelings and needs guess. That's how we would say it in NVC. So...
Interesting. Yeah, so we've kind of talked kind of generally about it. Maybe you can give some sort of examples to people out there. So if you're just, a lot of people are watching this and never heard about, I said NPC earlier, NPV, and they don't fully understand it, and I don't fully understand it still as well. What would you just say to your average person out there, what they should be looking into with this sort of a thing? Should they read a book first?
Oh, how to get started, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, get started, yeah.
Yeah, so if you like to read, there are a number of books out there. I would probably recommend Marshall Rosenberg's book. Marshall Rosenberg is the creator of nonviolent communication. It's titled Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. But there are other options. One thing you can do is join the Compassion course online. If you go to compassioncourse.org, that's a free 52-week online class that takes you through all of the concepts with exercises, and there's also a community that's practicing that. That's one option. Another thing is to hook up with someone like me and attend a training. So I teach workshops and intensives and retreats, and I also do one-on-one coaching. So working with a coach that's certified in NVC is another helpful way. Yes, that's what I would suggest. There's also a lot of videos on YouTube. If you look up nonviolent communication, you'll see trainings by Marshall Rosenberg, again, the creator of NVC, hours of material. So the resources are out there. If you're curious about this, go ahead and look into it. I really encourage everyone to do it. Again, I don't want to make it a should, because that would be a contradiction with the whole nonviolent communication perspective, right? We're trying to shift out of shoulds. But I just have found it so tremendously valuable, not only in communicating with people across kind of political divides or like different philosophical perspectives, but also in intimate relationships, like we were talking about conflicts with your wife, but especially parenting. If you want to be a peaceful parent, if you want to be an unschooling parent, nonviolent communication can really help you. Number one, be grounded in yourself so that you have enough perspective and empathy to provide a coercion-free environment for your children to grow up in. And also you can become more aware of the shouldn't thoughts that you might have about your kids, like they shouldn't be playing video games all day, and they should be cleaning up their room, and they should clean up their plate. All of these kind of judgments that we have towards kids, or like he's hyperactive and he has ADHD or whatever it is. Getting in touch with the feelings and needs underneath that, and nonviolent communication is really helpful in that regard. And also like dealing with children who are upset, someone who's crying or having a conflict between siblings, it's really useful in that arena. So if you're a parent, strongly recommend NVC.
Yeah, I actually, I think I've almost corrected myself on a few words I've used in this episode already, because I'm actually becoming a lot more aware of the words that you use and how they affect things. So you pointed out the word should. I think I almost might have said this earlier, that you should look into this. But if I didn't correct myself, what I was kind of saying, even in my own brain, because I knew it wasn't quite right to say should. I should have said something like you might want to, or I suggest that you consider looking into this, or things like that. And it's amazing how just little words can really just change and affect the entire dynamic between people. And you actually brought up that one of the courses you could take is called Compassion. And is that really what NVP is all about? Is compassion? Because that's one thing that I've kind of recognized about myself in my life, is that I have a lot of compassion. In fact, there's still to this day. Let's say someone walks in and and he's just a total idiot, and he's like, everyone just hates him immediately because of how he's acting.
Yeah.
I will be the one person to go, oh, I don't hate him. I actually kind of understand just a few things he said. I kind of understand why he is that way, and it's too bad he is that way. Whereas most people would be like, well, I don't like him, and that's it, right? And then that person's kind of just like closed off to any sort of thing. And I'm like, I'm with basically every single person that I ever meet. If they have some issues, I'm like, there's probably a reason behind that. And it's probably not really their fault. It was probably their parents or the schools or something happened to them, and now they're like this and that sort of a thing. So is that kind of like a big part of nonviolent communication is compassion?
Absolutely. So nonviolent communication sometimes is called compassionate communication. Okay. And essentially it's a strategy or like kind of a language map for how to practice empathy with yourself and with others. So self-empathy and empathy for others. And empathy engenders naturally compassion because, like you're saying, when you understand why someone is doing something and you're not thinking about what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing or how they are or how they aren't, these labels like that guy's just an idiot, and instead you have this curiosity about, that's interesting, I wonder why they're like that, I wonder what's going on for them. That engenders compassion, and so this really is a pathway to experiencing more compassion in your life. More compassion for yourself, because we all kind of have some version of an inner critic that's telling us what we should or shouldn't do or how we could be better and how we're not good enough.
We're all our worst enemy as far as I can tell.
Exactly, and so if we can build a compassionate relationship within our own minds, it makes it even more possible to do that with other people. And so I think that comes through this empathic understanding of the needs that are motivating people. And that's kind of, again, this core premise of NVC is everything we do to meet a need. No matter how abhorrent or horrific or terrible those behaviors or those actions are, there's always a need underlying it. And also probably a context, right? Like how many people have existed on this planet without experiencing some sort of trauma? I would say probably 0 people. So we all have our past experiences affecting our beliefs, our thought patterns, and our behaviors. And all of those behaviors are attempts to meet our needs, regardless if they are kind of tragic or ineffective or not. But again, when we become aware of what that need is that we're trying to meet, we can look at, there's this way that I've been trying to meet this need. Say like I've been drinking too much, right? Drinking is a strategy or a behavior that's trying to meet needs. Maybe it's to have peace of mind or some relief from whatever it is that's weighing on me. And when I realize, like, I really need this peace of mind or this relief or maybe a deeper sense of integration with myself, some healing perhaps, we can find other more life-serving strategies and then drop those strategies that aren't so life-serving away. And I think that's another nuance I wanted to point to with this whole should-shouldn't thing. I don't want to say that all judgment is bad and we shouldn't judge and we should never use the word should. Again, that's a contradiction. But there's kind of this perspective about judgment. There's moralistic judgment, right? The right-wrong kind of judgment. And then there's value-based judgment. And that's judgments like, yes, you should look into NVC if you would like to meet your need for more effective communication. It's not, you should look into it or else you're bad. So I hope you can see kind of that distinction there. So you're free to use the word should, just be aware of like the subtle impact that it can have, right? Like people feel like, you're telling me what I'm supposed to do. But if we can connect it to a value, like effective communication or connection or compassion, then it lands a little differently. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I'm actually really, I have a kind of an interest in all this stuff because I'm kind of fascinated by it. Just little ways that you change your words can dramatically affect the outcomes of those words. And you just pointed out a good one. And you're right. Like, you shouldn't, you just pointed out it's a contradiction, but you shouldn't always not say should. Yeah. But be careful how you use it. So yes. Just to make sure people understood that, it's like, I could have said, you should learn NPC and just leave it, or NPV or whatever NVP, and just leave it like that. And a lot of people will go, well, who's he to tell me what to do? What, he thinks he's better than me? All this sort of stuff just starts going off. But you just said the better way to say it was you should learn nonviolent communication if you would like to do this. So it's like an offer instead of a command. And I don't know if this is related to NVP or not, but one thing that I've done a lot in my life that I found works tremendously well is if you're trying to kind of get something across to someone or trying to actually kind of show them that they're kind of doing something that if they would change, it would probably improve their life. So you could go up to them and go, you're really closed-minded. You should be more open-minded. That alone will put them right on the defensive, right? Yeah. And no matter what, like it'll take like a lot of very cleared up people, a lot of Buddha-like people to just listen to you after that, right? And actually, I'm not saying I'm like Buddha, but like I'm that like open to like criticism and stuff like that. In fact, I love criticism. Yeah. I've done a lot of self-work, but I'm also super open to criticism. I never take it personally. I've never taken it personally my entire life. I'm like, oh, you think, okay, I'm going to listen to you. How do you think I should change, and how might that improve? But 90% of people are, if you go up and you go, you're closed-minded, you should be more open-minded, they're going to be like, oh, shut up, who are you, and I don't like this about you, and then forget about it. It's all done, right? And one little technique, and I don't know if this is related to what you're talking about or not, but one I found works tremendously well is to go, you seem a little closed-minded. I used to be like that all the time, and so I totally, like, I'm with you, like, we're the same. But here's one thing I did that actually really benefited me, and you might want to consider this, right? So one little thing that I do a lot, if I'm going to try to give some people some of that sort of input, is to relate it to myself and say, I've gone through the same thing, but not in a way, you have to be really careful how you say it. Because if you go, oh, I've put in the work, and I'm much better than you, so therefore, and then forget it, it's done. But you have to kind of like relate it like, oh, I've gone through this before. Oh man, I could give you some tips on this because I learned this, and I'm super excited that I've actually been able to change this about myself. And you might want to try it yourself, and like offer it to them in that way. Is that sort of stuff that nonviolent communications talks about, or is that just a little thing that I do personally?
There's some relation, but it's not entirely. So what I would say, like, kind of how you're saying, like, where are we the same, right? Like, I was like this, and I see how you're like this. Instead of doing that from a nonviolent communication perspective, we would say, like, let's say I was talking to someone who was really wanting Bernie Sanders to be president. Like, that can be a really tricky conversation for some of us. What I might try to do is connect with them on what needs they believe will be met if Bernie Sanders becomes president. What values do they hold that Bernie Sanders is kind of plucking those cords of, right? So I would imagine it's...
I want free stuff.
Maybe it's ease, right?
I like free stuff.
Ease or security. But I really believe, like most people, especially on the left, tend to really value compassion and care, and they really want everyone to be okay. And so if you can come to them from that place, like, hey, like, I care about people too. I want us all to be okay as well. Like, I want us all to thrive and have enough to eat, have enough money, have security, and enough time to do things that are fun and not just slave away at a job all the time. Connect with them where they're at and what they're valuing in their strategy. And the strategy in this case would be voting for Bernie Sanders. And then kind of share what alternate strategies you see are there that could also meet those same needs. So as an anarchist, we have all kinds of different creative, inspiring strategies like Bitcoin and entrepreneurship and all these different things, right? So it kind of relates to what you're saying. Or economic knowledge
that when the market is allowed to run, it's the best possible for all people, and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so when they push back against that, like maybe give them some empathy about a need for trust, like not really trusting the greedy people. There's this whole idea of like that's a judgment, right? So try even to translate that. And it can be a back and forth. But if we come with like, you socialist idiot, like, how could you vote for this guy? Like, don't you see this is just so stupid? Don't you know anything about economics? It's like you were saying, immediately we get pushback and defensiveness, and it's really difficult to connect from that place. So if we drop down into the needs level and we connect needs or values, and we connect there to begin with, it creates an opportunity for more comprehensive conversation and more openness and curiosity, not only on your part, because you're kind of understanding what they're trying to do with this kind of strategy you might be judging as stupid, but also like in them, because you're not coming at them with a criticism or a judgment, but more with this curiosity, with this openness, which is really what compassion is all about. So
yeah. And also, like, asking them questions not only helps you get to, like, a place where you can communicate better with them, but it also makes them kind of like, because most people won't do that, right? Most people, I find, when they're talking, they're just talking. So there's one person, they're like, blah, blah, blah. And then the other person starts talking. This person's like, I don't care. I'm just waiting until I talk again. And this guy's like, blah. Like, no one's listening, right? So if all of a sudden, if you're the guy who's like, oh, you want to vote for Bernie Sanders, why? And they'll go, oh, I think, it'll make things better for people. It's like, oh, well, why do you feel that? And, like, have you looked into this? Because, I've actually looked at some of these numbers, and actually it's better if you don't do these things. What do you think about that? And they're like, at the very least, they're like, wow, this person's actually listening and talking to me, which no one ever does. So already you're, like, way further along than almost anyone. And then if you learn more of these sort of techniques and get into it, you can actually start to, like, affect them and make them like lose some of their bad thinking that they've just been programmed with.
Absolutely, and that just brought to mind one important idea in nonviolent communication and practicing empathy is this whole idea of intention. And so if I'm coming to a conversation with the intention to change the other person, and I've already kind of articulated this, but it's like if I'm trying, my intention is to get this person to be different, they're going to feel that even just on an energetic level, and there's that need for autonomy, and that's going to happen, So really checking in, is my intention to change them or to convince them of something else, or is my intention to actually connect to this human being that's in front of me that's just like me, right? We are all the same at the feelings and needs level. We have different ideas and different strategies, but ultimately there is this experience that we're all having that connects us all. So that intention factor is really important. And I find that really connecting with ourselves and modeling what we would like to see makes it more possible for and more interesting for other people to then want to do that themselves. So
yeah, absolutely. Sorry, my driver just showed up. Yeah, stop in. See. And again, a lot of compassion stuff, just sort of like understanding people, and you're totally right. If you go in, and I actually had this with my Anarchast with Lark and Rose, we were talking about candles in the dark, and we talked about this. So I think he does some of this as well. Is that if you truly go into a conversation with someone and your whole goal is to change them and to no matter how good you are at it, they're going to feel it in one way or another. People really actually do. Most people are very disconnected from their feelings. It's something that I've been working a lot on myself, but you actually do have these feelings. Your body actually has its own intelligence, and it actually reacts, and you don't even know it necessarily. Absolutely. You just come away, like you might ask someone, like, how did you feel about that conversation? Like, he said a lot of good things, but there's something just off about it, and that's that. They were feeling like, oh, this guy's trying to push something on me and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's like a hidden agenda.
Yeah. So, I know a lot of people are going to comment, or might not even comment. They might have already turned this off. They're going to think things like, well, I don't want to talk to people, or I don't want to get, this quite a bit of work to actually like have a good conversation with someone. I don't want to, all that kind of stuff. There's two things I would say to that. One is, you of course don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want. But learning this stuff is really useful in life, in every facet of life. We're not just talking about converting, I don't like to use the word converting, waking people up to the best ideas, which are things like freedom and stuff like that, but your relationships, your business life, if you learn these sort of things, it's really useful. And I know there's certain kind of people, right, that are kind of like they're very antisocial, and they're very, they just don't want to talk to a lot of people and all that kind of stuff. I'll tell you, if you're still watching this and you're that kind of person, you will improve your life quite a bit dramatically, I believe, if you can learn some of these things. So you're actually, what's actually actually probably going on here, and I don't want to be a psychologist, and I don't know you. I'm talking to a camera. I don't even know who you are. But for the people out there who are like that, you probably have had some sort of things happen in your life that have affected you in certain ways that have made you this way. And when you hear things like, oh, you might want to try to learn these sort of things, your first sort of reaction is this kind of like anger or irritation or stuff like that. But that's not actually really you. That's all your traumas and all your past life experiences. And if you can, again, it all goes back to working on yourself as well. Once you work on yourself, you can be open to more things like that. So for the people out there who think they're antisocial, who think they're introverts, who don't want to learn this stuff, try it. Try to be open to it. Try to figure out why you're so against that too. Try to get to the real root of the feeling that you're having. That is, I don't want to do this. This makes me angry, or it's like upsetting me. Anytime that you actually feel that way, and I do it all the time. Like every day, I'll watch something right on YouTube. And they'll say something, and it'll kind of like trigger me a little bit. I'm like, I can't watch this. It's, these people are idiots or whatever. And I just try to get past that as much as possible and try not to let that affect me. I can go, okay, I think they're wrong on that. So I've looked into this. I think they're wrong. But I can still listen to what they're saying, and I can still be open to different ideas. And the more that you could be like that, I've found, the better life you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just second that. NVC has improved my life tremendously, just for me personally. I'm not even around connecting with other people. That's a whole other thing that's definitely improved that. But just having an awareness of like why I feel a certain way, what might be going on there, why am I thinking I don't like to connect with other people, and being aware of those needs, it gives me so much more freedom in my life, because no longer am I behaving from a place of like shoulds and have-tos and musts and a sense of obligation and duty, and that's all kind of statist thinking, to use a non-violent communication way of saying it. And when we're aware of what our needs are and what's motivating us, like I said, you just have so many more choices about how to go about meeting those needs and be much more efficient and much more effective and have a greater sense of freedom and awareness. And that really, I don't know who could say they wouldn't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to let people know, some of the things I've done that have helped me to get better at these things is things like therapy. And, of course, every therapist is different. And you get some good ones and some bad ones. But just talking out some of these things sometimes. Some people, a lot of people just hold a lot of this stuff inside. They don't even know where it's all coming from. And if you have a good sort of coach or therapist, you can kind of get to the bottom of it, where it's like, oh, that's weird. Like the whole reason I've been thinking that is because my dad told me when I was 3 that I'm not good enough at this or something like that. It's like, oh, wow. And another thing that's really helped is things like meditation and just sort of spending time every day. And even my friend Luke Radowski talks a lot about this. He does it, and I do it, is every day I take some time just to myself, and you can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want, but it's basically just time to myself, and I try to quiet my mind a little bit, try to just look at the thoughts that are coming through, and after a while you're kind of like, where is that thought coming from? And you can kind of get to the bottom of it, and stuff like that. Do you do stuff like that as well?
Yeah, totally. So I actually have a part-time gig at a flotation center. So I float in a float tank. Oh, awesome. Regularly.
I've done it once. It was really interesting.
Yeah, so I love it. I just really do it because I love it. And so to say that meditation, what it really helps me do is cultivate presence, like a really great quality of presence. So I'm not kind of like we mentioned in conversation very often, we're like kind of waiting. We already know what we're going to say next, and we're waiting to kind of respond to the next person. Or maybe we're like remembering like, oh, did I leave the stove on? Or like, remember last week when my uncle said this to me? And so we're either in the past or we're in the future, but we're not right here, right now. And I think that meditation can facilitate that, like a greater quality of presence. But not only that, like you're saying, is this awareness of our thoughts and having a buffer between ourselves and our thoughts, so we're not so blended with them and thinking that that's necessarily the truth or all that there is. It's like we're aware of them and we can observe them more objectively, and then have a choice about whether or not, what to do about them. And that all translates really well into being able to connect with others and to hold space for others and hold space for ourselves. So, yeah, meditation is very helpful. Therapy also, I suggest anybody go into therapy, but like you said, it can be kind of a mixed bag in terms of quality when it comes to finding a therapist. One modality I found very helpful is called internal family systems therapy. If you haven't looked into that yet, I recommend that you do. It's another kind of lens I look through with my coaching clients. So I thought I would place that here as an invitation.
Yeah, awesome. And just a final thought on meditation is I have a few friends who are just always stressed out. Their life is complete chaos all the time. And I kind of suggest to them, you should try meditation. And always the same response from most of these sort of people who are like this is, I can't meditate. I can't turn my mind off. And I'm like, that's why you need to meditate. And the one thing that they don't get is that meditation and stuff like that is just like anything. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger tomorrow because you went to the gym today, right? But if you go every day to the gym for years, eventually you're going to be pretty ripped. You're going to be feeling awesome, all that kind of stuff. It's the exact same thing with this stuff. So for anyone out there, and just trust me on this because I was the same way before. See how I did that? But it's actually true that I also was like that. I was like, when people told me, I was like, well, I tried it yesterday. Man, I couldn't go 10 seconds without like 50 thoughts going through my head. And they said to me what I'm saying to you now. It's like, you just got to keep going. Just keep going on it. And you eventually reach this point where you actually get kind of good at it. And just like anything, it's just like once you kind of do things for like weeks or months or years, you start to get really good at it. And it's really kind of satisfying to know, looking back at me, like me trying to meditate 4 years ago, forget about it. It was like just a mess. And now it's like I can do it so easily. Actually, I can almost do it anywhere. So I'll be on a plane and I'll meditate. Well, I got nothing to do. I'm taking off. I can't even look at my phone. I'll meditate. And very quickly I'm into that meditative sort of state, and I'm feeling really good and all that kind of stuff. So my whole point with that whole thing is, if you've never even tried it, just try it. Trust me. And if you've tried it and it didn't really work for you because you only tried it once or twice, it'd be the same, like I said, as it's like, oh, I want to learn how to be a rocket scientist. It's like, oh, I read a book for an hour yesterday and I didn't get it all, so I guess I'm not good at rocket science. Like, it takes a while, so give yourself some time. And that's one thing you brought up earlier is don't be so hard on yourself either. Always. One thing that I've learned, again, is that I used to be so hard on myself. No one was harder on me than me. And this is the case with most people. And now I'm like, it's okay. Fell off the wagon on that one, get back on it. We're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Let's just start again. Today's a new day. Let's just start again. Like, don't be hard on yourself and give these things a shot.
Yeah, I think what you're really saying, Jeff, is that it's a practice, right? And practice makes perfect, but you're not going to be perfect right out the get-go. And also I would recommend trying to start small. Like, you're not going to go straight from sitting on your ass all day to running a marathon the next day. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You're going to be in pain and you're not going to do well and you're going to be frustrated and turned off to the experience. So even if you just start with 1 minute at a time, start as small as you need to start and just come back to it and then you'll improve. It'll get easier over time. The same thing with nonviolent communication. People come into my workshops and they're like, oh, how are you so good at this? It's like, well, I've been doing it for 10 years, So it's not like you just get it right away. It takes time and practice for integration to occur. And I really love your self-compassionate perspective that you have on yourself when you are kind of less than perfect or you don't do what it is that you set out to do initially. It's like having that perspective, like it all contributes to learning. Everything we do contributes to learning. It's never a waste of time. There's always something to learn out of it. So, yeah, just give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've had in the last 5 years, I've had major advances and then major drop backs. So, sort of like two steps forward, one step back sort of a thing. Yeah. And in the years ago, I'd be like, oh, I'm just not good enough. I can't do it. I guess I'm just not strong enough. All this sort of stuff would go through my head. But what I learned after a few years of, that happening every now and then is, wow, I learned a lot. Like falling back that one step made me realize how much I hate being in that place, and it makes me so much stronger now to keep going. So instead of beating myself up, I'm like, okay, I learned from that. Like it always is a learning experience. Everything can be a learning experience. You just have to be open to that being the case.
Yeah, and I think that kind of circles back to this whole unschooling perspective. It's like in school, out of school, it doesn't matter. Just having this attitude, this autodidact kind of way of relating to your experiences, like I can learn from anything, and then nothing kind of seems like a total waste of time, you know, even failure. Like you can, and then you, like you say, like get clarity, like, oh, I really don't like when I'm in this place, and that can even be motivation and inspiration to take that next step forward. So. Yeah,
absolutely. So great stuff. Looking forward to seeing you at Anarchapulco 2020 speaking there on this. We have so many people along these sort of wavelengths. So if you're into any of this sort of stuff, definitely come. The health and wellness, most people are talking about these sort of things and how to, improve your life, those sort of things. And so, Katie, if there's, let people know about your website or anything you're doing, your coaching, anything you want to let them know.
Yeah, so my name, again, is Katie Testa, and you can visit my website. It's www.mdnvc.org, and there you can find all my contact info, find out about future trainings, coaching, if you're interested in that. I love to work with people and share this. This is what I'm passionate about, and I love doing, so I'd love to connect with you. Come to my workshops and my talk at Anarchapulco. Come to Anarchapulco. I'm really excited to see the diverse group of people that gathers there, all in beautiful Mexico. And also coming up, I will have a parenting program, a needs-based parenting program taking place in Manhattan beginning in March, going through May. So if you're a parent who would like to try to learn and apply these skills, you don't have to have any previous experience. So follow me and look out for that information. And thanks for having me, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. And so you will be doing a workshop at Anarchapulco as well as talking?
That's correct, yeah.
Oh, great. I haven't actually looked at the website lately. I don't know if we have the workshops all listed. Do you know if you have your workshop listed right now?
I don't think it's listed yet.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit behind. We've had a whole bunch of issues this year, as it seems like every year we always do.
It's a huge ordeal to organize an event like props to you.
Luckily, I don't have to do a lot of it, but even just kind of overseeing it is a lot of work. And so, but anyway, I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. So for anyone who's been watching this whole thing, they're like, oh, I really want to get into this. Definitely, if you're coming to Anarchapulco, definitely sign up for Katie's workshop, and you can do it one-on-one and with a bunch of other people. And coming up February 13th to 16th, right here in Acapulco, Mexico. Not very long, just a few weeks away. So it's not too late. There's still tickets available. Still hotel rooms available. So if you want to come down, definitely come down and check it out. I think most people have found that it's been a great benefit, and definitely worth it to come down to Anarchapulco for numerous reasons, including meeting people like Katie and thousands of other people that are pretty amazing as well. So I'll leave it at that. We'll have all the information for Katie's stuff down below, and that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
Anarchapulco, it's so hype, I'm trying to tell ya. This the event of the year and best vacation ever. Ron Carter, Jeffrey Tucker, just to name a few. Get your tickets, you don't want to miss it. You should roll through, talking politics to health and self-improvement to investing. So many things, not one thing. Learn how to live life unchained, yeah. 4 days vibing on the beach, time to connect, all about growth. Way more than a conference, this is Anarchapulco, yeah. Let's go.
You ain't seen nothing yet.